Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. You're on the Bible Forum. It is Sunday night, October 8, 2017. It is the weekend after the massacre in Las Vegas, Nevada. Taylor Benge, Benge, is a survivor of this mass shooting that claimed the lives of more than 58, now 59, it may be more before it's over, people, injuring hundreds more. He spoke to CNN about the shooting's aftermath and how it impacted his faith. Taylor described how he, a former agnostic, was changed by the course of events that unfolded Sunday night. In his words, he says, I was an agnostic going into that concert, and now I am a firm believer in God because, well, there's no way that all that happened and that I made it out and was blessed enough to still be here and alive to talk to you today. And nothing. That is a sum total of his salvation experience, his experience with God, his conversion experience. He is no longer an agnostic. He is a firm believer in God. But that's not the miracle of new birth. It's not an understanding of the amazing intricacies in the universe. It's not a marvelous way that the bodily systems work in harmony and steadily. It's not the life testimony of those who have gone before, both Christian and not Christian. People who have decided against God, knowing a lot more about it than Taylor does. He's not describing a relationship with God. He's simply saying to you, I'm still here. I'm still alive and I'm talking to you. And now I accept the fact that there's a God. Is this the sum total of most people's understanding? The great God of the universe has saved me from whatever potentially disastrous event had befallen? And the answer is largely yes. A large percentage of people make their decisions this way. Even in the lives of people who are in church every Sunday, maybe with you. This is the spiritual state of the so-called church in America today. We even have a name for it. We call it battlefield conversions. Now, what's the real question surrounding the Las Vegas massacre? The media has asked all week, why? While the Bible believer asks, why not? The Bible declares that the heart of every human being on this planet at its birth is desperately wicked, deceitful above all things, beyond anything we can imagine. More wicked than shooting up a crowd of innocent people. More wicked than killing babies in the womb. More wicked than feeding pornography to children. More wicked than giving life to children who will never know an intact family. More wicked than denigrating the one true God of heaven. You see, the world declares that human beings are basically good. And if we just simply cultivate that goodness in our children, well, the next generation is going to be so much better. About 6,000 or 7,000 years of human history stands diametrically opposed to that concept. History points to ups and to downs as far as societies go, but the trajectory is largely down. Our own United States of America is an illustration, starting out on the high moral plane that is our founding documents. It didn't take long to descend into a modified form of barbarism. There always were people who rejected the American ideals. There were always people who ran after selfism and destruction wherever they could find it. But it wasn't until our government leaders were able to craft a new national morality that things started to come undone. We abandoned our Christian heritage, and we have now launched out into socialism. If we look back, we could mark this probably in very dynamic terms from the 1920s. But the seeds were sown so much earlier. Back in the mid-19th century, the mid-1800s. The Great Depression came along in the 1920s and 30s, a depression which was a purely man-made catastrophe. Our government was able to then add on to us at that moment in time, that decade, some completely made up rights. The rights to Social Security. People should not get old and not have a cushion. Income taxes, and ultimately government welfare and health care. They were the core issues in what was called progressivism. Think Teddy Roosevelt. All of these have proven to be destructive. They are destructive of responsibility. They are destructive of accountability. The law of the universe says what you sow, you will also reap. And our government came along and said, no, it's not like that. We can fix that. We can alter reality. Our government said no one should have to endure pain and suffering as long as there is still $1 in the government treasury and there's still somebody with the courage to spend it. The fact that it's our dollar isn't something most of us thought about until recently. And the result here is we now have a society that pretty much does not teach the values necessary for success, let alone for survival. Instead, it teaches collectivism. Somebody else, a bunch of somebody else's out there will always be available to take care of you should you fail. Think of credit cards. Think of the Social Security benefits. Think of all of the medical and psychological benefits and the different kinds of things that are available for people who just really are falling through the cracks or maybe have problems. It's a philosophy that is the very fabric of our society. Now, add to this other immoral things. I mean, welfare is immoral. Government health care is immoral. Unemployment insurance is immoral. Social Security, Medicare, no-fault divorce. But think abortion. How did we get abortion on demand? Well, it came as a result of the other immoralities that we justified. And it doesn't take very long before we just start finding creative ways to kill one another. We do it with drugs. We do it with guns, knives, cars. We even do it with sex. Can you say AIDS? When a society can kill the unborn for selfish reason, we're pretty much at the end. We even have a religion that advocates murdering people who disagree. And we still consider that we're making progress. We call ourselves progressives. The world is on the verge of total destruction, while our leaders cheer us on and the average American is oblivious. The folks in most countries of the world are not dancing. They're struggling. They're struggling simply to find food and water. And in those same countries, their leaders are living in opulence. And their religious leaders? These people worship anything and anyone but the one true God of heaven. What we saw in Las Vegas last weekend is simply a more shocking version of what happens every Sunday in many of our so-called churches. Spiritual bandits without masks steal people's money, rob people of basic truth, and set them up to fail in the one area that is critical, the area of their spiritual destiny. People who need to hear the gospel instead are hearing a fun-loving, you can have it all, God loves everybody kind of philosophy. And they take that philosophy right into hell. The Bible comes along and says, here's the truth. Here's the truth that saves. Here's the truth that will bring you the salvation that you so desperately need, simply because you can't do this on your own. And these people refuse to tell you what it is. They tell you something that's a little different than what it really is. And they call it church. They call it the same thing that you get in other places where they actually have a Bible and they know what it is and they believe it. And they're doing this for popularity. They're doing it for prestige. They're doing it for wealth. And they're holding up the Jesus who did not even have a change of clothing. People with $400,000 private jets, suites in the Trump Tower. And all of this is going to continue to get worse until Jesus comes. We are now debating the Second Amendment to the Constitution because somebody had a whole storehouse of guns and was willing to shoot people with these guns. No one is talking about that man's heart. No one is talking about what philosophies were shared with him as he was growing up, in his family, in his education, in his social interaction, in his religion, and everybody has one. The issue now becomes the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. Well, the right to bear arms didn't kill anybody. A man did. And he would have done it with a pitchfork if he didn't have anything else. Guns just make it easier. Well, let me explain to you, if you don't know, why we have a Second Amendment in our Constitution. Why do we have the right to bear arms? You don't have that in Russia. You don't have that in a lot of socialist countries. You don't have that in a lot of other kinds of countries either. We have it. Well, the Constitution explains it to us. It talks about a well-regulated militia and how a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, leads to the right of people to keep and to bear arms. And the Constitution says that right shall not be infringed. You're allowed to have this gun, to bear arms. To protect you from your neighbor? No. Although that may happen. To protect you from armies that might come across the ocean and invade your shores? No. Although that may come, and the militia is there. That's part of it. But the right to bear arms in America is so that we can protect ourselves from our government. The framers of our Constitution came from a world where the government was the problem. And they wanted to make sure that that never happened again, that no citizen of these United States would ever have to worry about a king or a dictator or anybody like that dominating you so completely as King George did the colonies and other British subjects as well. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court has stepped in on a number of different occasions to explain this. And what how they've explained it is that this is not a federal right. It is a state right. This freedom, this right to bear arms, is a state issue, and each state can regulate how that's going to happen. And we have several states that forbid individual ownership. They are all liberal states. There's a reason for that. But most states will grant you the ability with varying limitations so that you can have weapons in case the government gets out of hand. Our problem is the human heart. I have a weapon. I have never fired it at anything but a target. I don't expect to do that ever in my life. But I have it and I carry it. I would not probably live in a state that didn't let me do that. I grew up in a state that doesn't let you do it. I got out. I'm not going back. Because there are these people in the world who will just take it in their head to get a gun and start shooting other people. They do it in churches. Did you see the one recently? Fella came into a church and started shooting people. One of the ushers went out to his car, came back with his gun and shot the man. Everybody's happy. In New York, he would go to jail. In California, he would go to jail. The problem is not the guns. The problem is the heart of man. And I thank God I live in a country where the framers of our Constitution understood that. Our liberal media, our liberal churches, our liberal education systems, the liberal philosophies out there, they don't get it. They think everybody is wonderful and it takes somebody really weird to do this. The Bible says everybody at the very heart of their being is desperately wicked beyond anything you can imagine. When you see a 2-year-old throwing a temper tantrum, believe me when I tell you, that child can get angry enough, your child, that if his little hands could hold a gun or a knife, he would kill you in that rage. That's why we have parents, to parent that out of them, to acculturate them. That's why we have educational systems, to moderate and mitigate. Neither one is working anymore. Look for more of this to happen in the future.